Westernspring Television. Ours it is.
Good evening and welcome to Spring Global on Westernspring Television. Now the headlines. Presidential Election Petitions Tribunal consolidates all petitions against Tinubu's election. In Europe, Russia urges fleeing residents in Belgorod region not to return yet. United Kingdom bans international students from bringing in family members. My name is Damilola Raphael. The Presidential Election Petitions Tribunal has consolidated all the petitions against the election of Bola Tinubu as Nigeria's president. Senator Tinubu, the standard bearer of the All Progressives Congress, was declared winner of the February 25th presidential poll. Aggrieved by the outcome, the People's Democratic Party, the Labour Party, and the Allied People's Movement are challenging Senator Tinubu's victory. As the resumed court session today, a 5-member panel of the court, led by Justice Haruna Samani, held that the petitions would be consolidated and heard side by side given the time constraints to hear and determine the petitions. The court has fixed May 30th to commence definite hearing of the petitions. By law, the tribunal has 180 days to determine the petitions, and that expires on September 16, 2023. In the meantime, the trial of Afrobeat singer Seun Kuti for alleged assault has been stalled following the absence of Chief Magistrate Adeola Olatubosun of the Magistrates Court in Yaba, Lagos. The singer was scheduled to be arraigned before the court today, but reports said the Chief Magistrate was on an official assignment. Seun, the youngest son of late Afrobeat legend Fela Kuti, was apprehended on April 15th after he was filmed assaulting a police officer on the 3rd Mainland Bridge. He was detained as the State Criminal Investigation Department and arraigned before the Magistrates Court on April 16th. Ahead of the singer's trial today, demonstrators were seen outside the court carrying banners with inscriptions like "Free Seun Kuti" and "End Police Brutality," amongst others.
Free Seun Kuti! 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 Free Seun Kuti!
President Muhammadu Buhari says he closed the country's land borders to encourage Nigerians to produce food for their consumption. He said although the move was initially criticized, Nigerians eventually appreciated it. President Buhari spoke today while inaugurating the new customs headquarters in Abuja, which reportedly cost 19.6 billion naira to construct. The president said he nominated Hamid Ali as Comptroller General of the Nigeria Customs Service because of his experience and competence. He said the late Sani Abacha, a former military head of state, gave Colonel Ali problematic tasks to accomplish. On his part, Colonel Ali said the increase in the salaries of customs personnel makes them less susceptible to corruption.
I think Colonel Hamid Ali, to make sure that I have peace in my mind, I again brought him here. Please note that from Lake Chad to Benin is more than 1,600 kilometers. Only God can effectively guard that border. So you need a person who will have the energy and the competence to effectively supervise. And I deliberately closed the borders because knowing Nigerians, they order rice and give some Niger address, and then they bring the rice here. And with our land and our potentialities, God, we thank God, Nigeria is favored. We have people, we have land, we have weather. How many nations are so lucky as Nigeria in the world? Very few nations are as lucky as we are. We thank God for that. So closing that border, 1,600 kilometers, more than that, from Lake Chad to Benin. And Nigeria insists that they have to impress their neighbors and other people that they eat foreign rice. I said, no rice. You either you eat what you grow what you eat, or you die. I think I try to make my point.
Outside Nigeria, the trial of Senegal's opposition leader on charges of rape has resumed, but Ousmane Sonko failed to appear in court for a second time. Security forces patrolled the streets of the capital, Dakar, fearing trouble from his supporters. Mr. Sonko is very popular amongst young people. The 48-year-old politician says the trial, which started last week, is politically motivated and aimed at stopping him from running for the presidency next year. He denied sexually assaulting a woman who worked in a massage parlor, as well as making death threats against her. And still in Africa, more airstrikes and clashes have been reported in Sudan, dampening hopes for the latest attempt at a ceasefire in the conflict-hit country. A new 7-day truce officially began yesterday, but witnesses have already spoken of further hostilities in the capital, Khartoum, and elsewhere. The violence began 5 weeks ago, triggered by a power struggle between the leaders of the regular army and a paramilitary faction. Previous attempts to achieve a lasting pause in hostilities in a northeast African country have been shaky or collapsed. There was renewed optimism for this new ceasefire, which came about following formal talks that were brokered by Saudi Arabia and the United States. In Europe, residents in Russia's Belgorod region who have fled their homes due to fighting there have been urged not to return yet. Russian officials say an armed sabotage group crossed from Ukraine and attacked the Grevoronsky district by the border yesterday. Moscow has now launched a terrorism investigation as fighting continues. Ukraine denies responsibility and said Russian citizens from 2 paramilitary groups were behind the incursion. No deaths have been reported in the fighting, but a number of people are believed to have been injured. Elsewhere, vandals have attacked the grave of Mahsa Amini, the young woman whose death in custody last September sparked anti-government protests across Iran. Photos from her family showed a pane of glass covering her tombstone, and portrait was smashed at IH's cemetery in the western city of Sakaz. Her brother posted on Instagram that it was the second attack in recent months without directly blaming anyone. Mahsa died in hospital in Tehran on the 16th of September, 3 days after she was detained by morality police in the capital for allegedly violating Iran's strict rules requiring women to cover their hair with a hijab or headscarf. Turning to the United States, President Joe Biden and top Republican Kevin McCarthy have called their latest talks on the debt ceiling productive, but no deal has yet been reached. The debt ceiling is a spending limit set by Congress which determines how much money the government can borrow. Failure to raise it beyond the current cap of roughly $31.4 trillion by June could result in the U.S. defaulting on its debt.
President Joe Biden and House Speaker Kevin McCarthy could not reach an agreement Monday on how to raise the U.S. government's $31.4 trillion debt ceiling with just 10 days before a possible default that could sink the U.S. economy, but vowed to keep talking. The Democratic president and the top congressional Republican have struggled to make a deal as McCarthy pressures the White House to agree to spending cuts in the federal budget that Biden considers extreme, and the president pushes no taxes that Republicans have rejected. McCarthy is not willing to consider Biden's plan to cut the deficit by raising taxes on the wealthy and closing tax loopholes for the oil and pharmaceutical industries, and is focused on reducing spending in the 2024 federal budget. The debt ceiling is a spending limit set by Congress, which determines how much money the government can borrow. Both sides stress the need to avoid default with a bipartisan deal after Monday evening's meeting, however, and signals that they'd be talking regularly in coming days.
We need to cut spending, but here's the disagreement. I think we should be looking at tax loopholes and making sure the wealthy pay their fair share. I think revenue matters, as well as long as you're not taxing anybody under $400,000. And so we still have some disagreements, but I think we may be able to get where we have to go. We both know we have a significant responsibility.
I felt we had a productive discussion. We don't have an agreement yet, but I did feel the discussion was productive in areas that we have differences of opinion. We're going to have the staffs continue to get back together and work on some of the things that we had talked about. So.
Democrats and Republicans have until June 1 to increase the government's self-borrowing limit or trigger an unprecedented debt default that economists warn could bring on a recession. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen on Monday offered a sobering reminder of how little time is left, saying the earliest estimated default date remains June 1 and that it is highly likely that Treasury will no longer be able to pay all government obligations by early June if the debt ceiling is not raised.
A default would crack open the foundations upon which our financial system is built. And it's very conceivable that we'd see a number of financial markets break, with worldwide panic triggering margin calls, runs, and fire sales.
Republican Representative Patrick McHenry ruled out any partial budget agreement to raise the debt ceiling.
The president sent a credible team. I'm sorry. Half of it, 2/3 of you know Shalonda Young personally, right? He sent warriors up here on behalf of his administration. That's who he sent up. That's who we're negotiating with. They're a highly credible team. They're a tough negotiating team. These are tough discussions that we're having, but they're honest. We're honest with each other. So what I talked about was a lack of urgency.
Any deal to raise the limit must pass both chambers of Congress and therefore hinges on bipartisan support. McCarthy's Republicans control the House 222 to 213, while Biden's Democrats hold the Senate 51 to 49. It will take several days to move legislation through Congress, if and when Biden and McCarthy come to an agreement. McCarthy said that a deal must be reached this week for it to pass Congress and be signed into law by Biden in time to avoid default. A failure to lift the debt ceiling would result in dire consequence by triggering a default that would shake financial markets and build interest rates higher on everything from car payments to credit cards. Temitakpe Ajijalauluola, Westernspring Television News.
You're watching Spring Global on Westernspring Television. We will be right back after this break.
Ahmadu Bello brings Prince Royal was born 6th of December 1910 at Raba Village, Sokoto, northwestern Nigeria. His father was a district head and heir apparent to the Sultanate throne from the house of Usmanu Danfodio, a religious and social reformer who brought the Habib dynasty under the Fulani Caliphate in the beginning of the 19th century. Ahmadu Bello raised the bar of political consciousness and participation when, in 1944, he engineered the establishment of the Northern People's Congress (NPC) as the first political party in northern Nigeria and the rallying point for politicians in the region before independence. History will not forget Ahmadu Bello for his charisma and political sagacity, which provided easy passage for his kinsmen to assume political and administrative positions in Nigeria's post-independence era. The distinguished elder statesman and Sardauna of Sokoto has his face on his country's 200 naira currency as a mark of honor to one of the architects of Nigeria's independence. Westernspring Television identifies Ahmadu Bello as a watershed character in history. James Ajibolaige was a lawyer who obtained his first degree in classics from Nigeria's premier University of Ibadan. Born September 13, 1930, the orator and the polyglot spoke impeccable English, French, Igbo, Hausa, and Yoruba languages. His fine diction placed him among classical orators and public speakers like Cicero, the Roman orator. This attribute earned him the prefix Cicero of Esauke. He authored Kaduna Boy, an autobiography, Detainee's Diary, Constitution, and the People, among 6 other books. Bolaige was a colorful politician, elected governor of Oyo State in 1979 and appointed a federal minister in 1999. He was a pioneer founder of Afenifere, the Yoruba social, cultural, and political group. He invested his political sagacity to propel the group to the height of political leadership and decision-making in the southwest of Nigeria. Bolaige was assassinated on the 23rd December 2001. His murderers are yet to be apprehended till today. Westernspring Television identifies Bolaige as a watershed character in history.
You're welcome back. We'll continue to serve you more reports now as the Ugandan police have restricted night movement for Christian pilgrims traveling to Namugongo Shrine for next month's Martyrs' Day celebration, citing safety reasons. Pilgrims from the neighboring countries of Democratic Republic of Congo, Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, and South Sudan, as well as those from the furthest districts of Uganda, has started trekking on foot to Namugongo. Police Chief Okoth Ochola has directed regional commanders to ensure the pilgrims sleep in churches, schools, and community centers. He said no incidents of crime had so far been reported, and he ordered officers to provide security for those making the pilgrimage. And Kenyan police say they are hunting for the former leader of the outlawed Munkigi gang, Mainan Jenga, after seizing 2 firearms and cannabis from a home linked to him in western Nakuru County. In a statement, the Directorate of Criminal Investigations said the items were recovered following a raid mounted by detectives in Ngomongo village last week. Police said 8 suspected members of the Mungiki sect were arrested during the raid. Mr. Njenga was summoned to appear at police headquarters in Nakuru, but failed to do so and instead went into hiding. The Munkigi is a secretive sect that was banned in 2002 after being accused of being involved in violence and organized crime. In the United Kingdom, foreign postgraduate students on non-research courses will no longer be able to bring family members to the country under new immigration restrictions. The announcement has been made 2 days before official statistics are expected to show legal migration has hit a record 700,000 this year. Last year, 135,788 visas were granted to dependents of foreign students, nearly 9 times the 2019 figure. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak told ministers that the move, which will begin in January 2024, would help bring migration down. Home Secretary Suella Braverman said the rise in dependents being granted visas was unprecedented, and it was time for the UK to tighten up these routes to ensure it can cut migration numbers. In a statement to Parliament, she added that the move strikes the right balance between bringing down migration and protecting the economic benefits that students can bring to the UK. In the meantime, the International Monetary Fund, IMF, says Britain is no longer expected to suffer a recession this year, nor will it have the weakest economic growth in the group of 7 leading industrialized economy. Unveiling a dramatic upgrade to its outlook for Britain, the fund, which previously predicted Britain would face the worst 2023 of any G7 nation, said in fact the UK would grow by 0.4% this year. While this remains weak, it is nonetheless stronger than the 0.7% contraction previously forecast and stronger than the near-zero growth rate the IMF has penciled in for Germany. However, Managing Director of the IMF, Kristalina Georgieva, said the impact of the cost of living crisis will continue to cause pain across the economy. Chancellor Jeremy Hunt said the IMF report shows a big upgrade to the UK's growth forecast and credits the government's action to restore stability and tame inflation.
The UK authorities have taken decisive and responsible steps in recent months. This has promoted macroeconomic and financial stability during a time of heightened market volatility. Their efforts and the recent decline in energy prices are beginning to have a favorable impact on the economy. We now anticipate positive GDP growth of 0.4% for 2023, a 0.7 percentage point upgrade over our forecast from early spring, which was, as you might recall, minus 0.3%. At the same time, as we also heard from the Chancellor, inflation remains elevated. This reflects the impact of adverse terms of trade shock from Russia's war in Ukraine and historically tight labor markets. They are still recovering from the pandemic. We expect the impact of these factors to ease, and together with tight monetary and fiscal policies, bring inflation down to the Bank of England's 2% target by mid-2025.
WhatsApp says it will allow users to edit messages in a move that will see it match a feature offered by competitors like Telegram and Discord. The firm says messages can be edited for up to 15 minutes after being sent. The instant messaging service is part of US technology giant Meta, which also owns Facebook and Instagram. The feature will be made available to WhatsApp's 2 billion users in the coming weeks. Edited messages will be tagged as edited, so recipients are aware that the content has been changed. In sports, Bukayo Saka has signed a new deal to stay at Arsenal until 2027, saying the club is the right place to make the next step. The England forward has scored 14 goals for the Gunners this season, contributing 11 assists. At just 21 years old, he has already made 178 appearances for the club and has featured in all Arsenal's Premier League games over the past 2 campaigns. Second-placed Arsenal host Wolves in their final game of the season on Sunday, having missed out on the Premier League title to Manchester City. Next season, the Gunners will play Champions League football after a 6-year absence.
and thank you as well for everybody at the club that has been involved to try to get that deal done, to his family, his agent. You know, everybody has put a lot of work and time on it, and I think he represents this club in the best possible way, and I think he has made this new contract with his contribution to the team, to the club, for how he is, and now we have to move again.
And police in Spain have detained 3 people in connection with racist abuse directed at the Real Madrid footballer Vinicius Jr. during a march on Sunday. The police said in a message on Twitter that the 3 are aged between 18 and 21. The Brazilian international, who is black, has been subjected to such abuse numerous times this season. The latest incident during an away match at Valencia has sparked outrage in both Spain and Brazil. And before we end Spring Global, here is a recap of our top stories. The Presidential Election Petitions Tribunal has consolidated all the petitions against the election of Bola Tinubu as Nigeria's president. Residents in Russia's Belgorod region who have fled their homes due to fighting there have been urged not to return yet. We also brought you news in the United Kingdom that foreign postgraduate students on non-research courses will no longer be able to bring family members to the country under new immigration restrictions. You can follow us on our social media handles on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter at Westernspring Television. You can also watch us live on our YouTube channel at Westernspring Television. I am Damilola Raphael. Thanking you for watching. I'll see you at 7.